Greenland is 80% ice, 750,000 square miles of it. The world's biggest island, bigger even than Australia. Beneath these hills lies one of the richest uranium deposits in the Western world. But it may well be that the financial demands of a modern society will force their hand. Greenland's capital, Gottorp, a hodgepodge of starkly differing styles of architecture, reflecting an Arctic culture in transition, and many people say a population centralized and urbanized far too rapidly. Gottorp is a busy, bustling town. Some 10,000 people live here, 1/5 of Greenland's population. But 250 years of Danish rule brought problems even after the Eskimos, or Inuit as they prefer to be called, won home rule in 1979. Uummannaq is a typically Greenlandic town, fairly big with 1,800 people. But the population of most settlements in Greenland would fit into a double-decker bus. And since most villages are icebound for much of the year and hundreds of miles apart, the common market with its rules and regulations relating to Europe seems completely irrelevant. The Danish problem was that 80% of Greenland is ice, the rest just a narrow fringe of moss-covered granite. There is no agriculture or forestry, the only roads are in the towns, and no two towns are connected. Most settlements are minute, hundreds of miles apart, and mostly icebound. If the country was to function as a modern society, the Danes reasoned, centralization was vital. Today, many of the polar Eskimos, hunters from the wild, live in a world of fast food, fruit machines, and space invaders. It's hard to imagine that only 50 years ago, youngsters like these would have been living in houses of stone and turf. Now, the young are leaving their isolated settlements and villages for the bigger towns in ever greater numbers. For small communities based on family life, it's a terrible wrench. And it is rare that the promise of more money, big city glitter, and excitement are fulfilled. The rapid urbanization of the Eskimo or Inuit people by the Danes has had a devastating effect on their culture. Because while their material standards, health, housing and wages have undoubtedly improved, the creation of a modern social pattern has not been accompanied by human well-being. Alcoholism has replaced tuberculosis as the national disease. Crime is rampant and rising. Heavy drinking in a community where hunting rifles are a commonplace has produced an alarmingly high murder rate. 11 murders, 34 attempted murders, 500 assault and battery cases in the last year of statistics. Now the Home Rule government is waging an intensive anti-drinking campaign. Don't drink away your traditions, one poster says. There is envy too. Virtually every single item sold in Greenland, from food to furniture, is brought in through the Royal Danish Trading Company. And almost every store is Danish-owned. We the Greenlanders, the graffiti says, should not be taken over by the Danes. But although the Greenlanders were granted home rule 5 years ago, the Danes still hold almost all the best paid jobs. The contract for cleaning windows in this Danish-run office went to a Danish company. Even the chambermaids in the Danish-owned hotels are Danish girls. Outside, the Eskimo or Inuit picks up the rubbish. And yet the Greenlanders cannot support themselves, and the Danes contribute £2,000 a year for every man, woman and child in subsidies and investments. The Greenlanders' desire to escape the urban environment is evident on every balcony. Florentina and Samuel Ludvigsen grew up in a tiny village on the coast. They can hardly wait for the summer weekends when they take their boat and sail up the fjord to return to their roots. There is not much there, but it's a chance to talk with friends about the weather or hunting, because this is also an opportunity to stock the larder for the winter with prime reindeer meat. Up here, the mosquitoes are huge, vicious, and almost unbearable. It's a far cry from the modern Greenland. But from the pain and the frustrations of colonialism and urbanization, there has sprung a new national spirit, an awareness of the Inuits' own future. Sam Hall, News at 1 in Greenland. The 48-foot ship Saga Siglar is the most authentic replica of a Viking merchant ship ever built. 1,000 years ago, the Vikings sailed these seas regularly, taking with them their wives, their children, even their cattle, to settle in Iceland and later Greenland. The ice conditions off Greenland's east coast this summer were the worst on record. They hugged the outer edge of the ice pack, looking for open leads. Anxious moments because the ice is in constant motion, with 9/10 of it under the water. To be trapped would almost certainly mean the loss of the ship. The ice was so dense that the Coastal Ice Patrol said Saga Siglar would have to sail 1,000 miles out of her way to avoid it. And the only way into port was through a 40-mile gap in the ice, a gap that was closing at the rate of 1 mile an hour. But the ship was forced out of radio range, and after 3 days of no contact, an alert was raised.
Saga Siglar, Saga Siglar,
but the Viking ship was too far out, and the atmospheric conditions too poor for them to hear the calls being put out every 15 minutes. When they finally did make port, the ship sailed proudly up the Gotthard fjord like a duck with her ducklings. The 10,000 population of the capital turned out in force because while it had been 12 days since the latter-day Vikings' last landfall in Iceland, it was 5 centuries or more since such a ship last sailed these waters. It was a marvellous excuse for a celebration.
Men det bra det.
That's Ragnar Thorset, Arctic explorer and expedition leader, with his son Eric, who's just 11 and who sailed the whole way. What kind of a trip did you have, Ragnar?
Well, we met a lot more ice than we had expected, of course, so it was a much longer trip, but at least it has added 1,000 miles for our sailing to get to Brattahlid.
Would Eric the Red have had to go through that kind of ice condition?
I'm afraid that if Eric the Red had met a year like this, he would never have gone to Greenland.
There were the curious and the utterly fascinating. The mayor of Gotthard presented them with a medal and what looked like 3 decapitated flowers. But the mayor explained they were actually vitamin-rich herbs, as used by the Vikings 10 centuries earlier. A week later, the Saga Siglar set sail once more, heading this time for the North Atlantic and for America. Sam Hall, News at 1 in Gotthard, Greenland. When animal welfare groups like Greenpeace, working closely with the World Wildlife Fund, first showed Canadian hunters battering baby seals to death, much of the world was outraged. The pups particularly struck a chord in the hearts of most people. The anti-sealing campaigns were immensely successful. Import bans were imposed and thousands of seals were saved. But in Greenland, the effects were devastating, because 10,000 people dependent on seal hunting for their livelihood saw their incomes more than halved. And there is no farming or forestry to fall back on, because Greenland is 80% ice, 750,000 square miles of it, the world's biggest island, bigger even than Australia. Glaciers tumble chaotically down the fjords and break up into icebergs the size of 5-story office blocks. The polar Eskimo, or Inuit as he prefers to be called, must hunt and kill or die. The Inuit have been living on the very edge of survival in the high Arctic for 4,000 years, and life is much the same now as it was then, hunting seals from kayaks made from seal skins. Only the method of killing has changed. And the Inuit never kill baby seals. No one knows better than they the dangers of depleting the stocks. These hunters kill to eat. And what they and their families do not eat is given to the dogs. Each dog eats 5 pounds of meat a day, and there are 10 to 15 dogs in a team, the only form of transport in the Arctic for most of the year. The skins are used for clothing and footwear, and the scraps to make reins for the sled teams. Only then do the hunters sell the remaining skins, their only hope for a cash income. In 1975, the Greenland seal hunters were getting £17.29 for their furs. But when Greenpeace began their anti-sealing campaign the following year, the price dropped almost immediately to £15.35. And as the campaign intensified, it went right down to £6.70. And apart from a brief rise during the next 4 years, it has remained at pretty much the same level. Greenpeace is not just one organisation, but several disparate groups scattered around the world. And so it's difficult, if not impossible, to find anyone to speak for the movement as a whole. This is Greenpeace Limited in London.
We're not opposed to true Aboriginal sealing if all the products are used by the people in their native villages, etc. But the situation in Greenland is such that the seal hunt is now probably the largest seal hunt in the world, and tens and tens of thousands of sealskins are entering the market through Europe in the commercial sector.
They say, of course, that they take about 70,000 seals, but that's only 3% of the population, of the seal population.
Well, I don't think that's very well documented, and I couldn't really comment on that. The ringed seal population isn't very well known in that area. But you know, it really is nothing to do with us. When people start playing that game and entering fur markets and playing the commercial side of it, they live or die by the market, and the market has gone down, and so their prices, overall income has gone down. So that sort of underlines the commercial side of the seal hunts that has crept into it over recent years.
But you're talking about the livelihood of maybe 10,000 people, a fifth of the population of Greenland.
Well, you say their livelihood, but if they maintain that their livelihood is an Aboriginal existence. But of course, it's now depending more and more on a commercial existence and the commercial sale of those seal skins.
5 years ago, furs brought the expert seal hunter an average income of just over £1,000 a year. Today, it's down to about £350 a year.
I think that why Greenpeace continue their seal case is because it makes a lot of PR to them. For example, in German pictures, a big picture on the front page of a seal pup, it sells the papers and it gives money to Greenpeace. All in the advertisements you can always see some seal pups with beautiful eyes, and you can use a crocodile.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about Greenpeace. They always question a lot of things, but they never have any answers. For example, they've never been up here. We have never been able to get them to meet our hunters and discuss the current situation. The Greenlanders is not anymore at the stage where they can live without any kind of money. They have to buy ammunition. They like a cup of coffee, cigarette. They need petroleum for heating. Greenland has around 90 settlements. And I would say that at least 60 of them is 100% dependent on sealing. They are only there because of the seal. And I think we could experience a very sad thing in 20 years that European anthropologists come up here interviewing hunters in apartment buildings, asking them questions why they left their settlements. And then everybody in Europe would say, who could ever destroy that kind of a culture?
Beneath these hills lies one of the richest uranium deposits in the Western world, anywhere between 45 and 200,000 tons of it. The Greenlanders are loath to extract the uranium because they're afraid that radioactive waste could upset the sensitive ecological balance of the Arctic, which provides their livelihood. But it may well be that the financial demands of a modern society will force their hand and change the country's future completely. Sam Hall, News at 1 in South Greenland.